All right, here we are looking April right in the face here, and I'm looking outside right now, and it's a beautiful spring day. It's raining out, lakes are starting to open up. We got open water all over the place. There's places we can put the boats in if we wanted to right now. Boats sitting here, we're getting things geared up and ready here in the North Country to hit the open water. Some anglers already are. They're fishing rivers. They're starting to venture out on some of the lakes. Water temps are just breaching where ice should be forming, and things are on the up and up, right? So I want to talk about something that I've been asked relatively often, and it's the topic of tungsten. When it comes to tungsten, we've talked about tungsten on the ice fishing side of things many times. Probably have almost beaten it like a dead horse, and for good reason, because it catches piles of fish. If you're not using tungsten ice fishing, you probably are not catching as many fish. I think a lot of us would agree with that, and it's become a mainstay for us. But what about tungsten open water fishing? Now, you might say, you know, the bass fishing world has embraced tungsten for a long time. There's been tungsten weights, there's been tungsten jigs, there's all kinds of stuff on the bass realm, the bass world. We understand the value of tungsten. Small, heavy, but smaller, right? So you can use smaller profile weights, but they weigh the same as some of the bigger lead weights we used to use to punch through milfoil, to flip, to cover structure, to drop shot. So there's definite reasons, and we already understand some of those in the realm of bass fishing. So what about, let's say, panfish? Why do you want to lean towards tungsten for open water panfish? Bluegills, crappies, even perch. There's even walleye guys and gals using tungsten. And I want to explain a little bit of the benefits of tungsten in open water and why I lean towards that with some of my panfish setups especially. We're going to hit panfish here hard, since that's what we're going to be doing here the next month and a half before the fishing opener, and why I will be using a lot of tungsten jigs. For starters, you've heard me talk about keeping the panfish and ice fishing tackle out. I'm not going to touch on that and beat that dead horse, because I think that one's pretty obvious. So again, I'm still using my small tungsten jigs first thing in the boat. You can see right there, small little drop kick, Mackie Jamie. I use the Mackie Minnow, whatever it might be, but your favorite panfish offering is on my summer rod, rigged and ready. But specifically, and more importantly, why tungsten? So tungsten, we've talked about its advantages of being smaller but heavier. So now I can get that smaller presentation right now, even open water, when these bluegills and crappies are still somewhat finicky, not gorging themselves on big baits, and still picking off morsels, and still trying to build up that metabolism. So I'm using these smaller jigs. So that's an advantage of tungsten. I can get smaller, but I can stay heavy. I can have more control. I can feel it if that's what I want to do. But in this situation, I am bobber fishing. So now I'm not putting a split shot. You can see anywhere on my line between my bobber and my jig, because now I can fish a smaller jig and not add extra weight on the line. In the past, we wanted a small jig like this to catch these finicky bluegills and crappies, and there was lead. I'd have to put a split shot on my line or something to that effect. And some anglers might tell you it doesn't matter. And in some situations when the bite is good, they are right. It doesn't matter. But in order to give me that foolproof plan, that peace of mind, that confidence, I don't want weight here. So that's where I can fish these small tungsten jigs and present that smaller profile to these fish on my open water setup. It also keeps that bait down there on the water column better without weight. So when I got windy conditions, colder conditions, a lot of times in the spring here, we're dealing with some wind. We're dealing with different front systems that are coming through. The environment's constantly changing. We don't know if it's going to be cold. We don't know if it's going to be warm. We might be fishing with gloves on. We might be fishing in our ice fishing gear. So the bigger advantage you can have to not have to feel the bite and be sensitive and really have to pick up on those things because comfort might be not as easy, that gives me an advantage. So that's where I'm fishing tungsten. That keeps the bait down there in the strike zone. It's not floating around. So another advantage of tungsten. So now I can focus on keeping this bait where I want it underneath the float setup without adding those extra sinkers and split shots. Because when you get some of those finicky upbiting crappies, a lot of times they pick up that jig, and if you got a split shot up here, this might take a while to translate to that bobber to really detect the bite versus either a nibble or whatever. So if you're getting some of those upbiting fish, it can change the way that float, that indicator resonates to you a lot easier than a weight or something absorbing some of that bite, if that makes sense. So tungsten, Small profile, great for underneath the float. That's going to be what I'm going to be throwing right out of the gate. Same exact jig I had on a week and a half ago catching bluegills and crappies under the ice is the same jig tied on this open water rod, tiny little float, and that's what I'll be targeting panfish with. And if I have to go deeper, I may increase the size of my offering. I may downsize my line so that it goes down slower or faster, a number of different things. But I think I'll be able to find some fish starting to move shallow. My late ice bite was shallow. Everything was under 6 feet. Those fish are in that area or they haven't gone far. We just have to fish small and we have to slow down to get these fish to bite. So that's going to be my setup. Small drop kick, Mackie plastic or a small twister tail, light float, and hammer hard with tungsten. The other reasons for tungsten, now you start going to, let's say, a larger jig. This is a 16th ounce drop TG. Again, a tungsten jig. Yep, that is a 16th ounce jig. Doesn't look that big, does it? But again, because of the advantages and characteristics of tungsten, I can fish this smaller jig but have the weight and the control. So I just mentioned if I'm going to go a little deeper or on a weed line or fish some basin crappies, I can now fish that small profile. That's the profile I want. A 1.5 to 2 inch twister tail and a small profile jig, but have the 16th ounce weight capacity to get down there and feel what's going on. Whether I'm drifting, whether the wind's blowing, whether I have a pair of gloves on, I now have more control. So tungsten gives you control in weight or control through weight because the smaller offering is heavier. So when I want to go small and I need to go small, tungsten gives you that advantage. It also gives you a better feel against rock, rubble, weeds. Tungsten transmits, call it noise or vibration or feel, or when you tap a rock or tap a piece of wood or hit something or drag across gravel, it transmits some of that vibration differently than lead. So it also gives you a little more control and feel. So another advantage of tungsten is not just the weight factor, it's how it resonates that feel against rock, gravel, wood, brush, whatever it might be. It's amazing that it does make a difference on how you can feel that movement under the water and when it hits against something. So I'll be fishing a small 16th ounce drop TG tungsten jig here right away too, if I have to slide off and fish basin fish, deeper weed line crappies and bluegills, if that's what the situation calls for. So I feel confident that my 1-2 punch of small tungsten jig offering, same thing I'm ice fishing with, and a float, or my 16th ounce tungsten jig, still small profile, but I can feel it. Between these two offerings, I feel confident if I hit the water right now, today, I could catch fish with one of these two systems. So 2 reasons to fish tungsten and why tungsten. And if you start to carry over these same mentalities for summertime fishing, when you might be fishing deeper crappies or walleyes, you can fish some of these tungsten jigs for walleyes, for bass, and get the desired outcome. So when I'm dragging that jig across gravel, if I'm bouncing it off a rock, it emits a different feel, a different vibration. You can feel things better, and it allows you to fish that smaller profile jig. So if you're doing a Ned rig for bass, or if you're fishing a small fluke with a light wire jig for walleyes, or even jig fishing under a float, which is common now, a lot of anglers call it corking. I want the smallest offering possible, but you don't want it to be so light that it's floating all over the water column. It doesn't stay in the strike zone. That's where these tungsten jigs are really excelling. The Ned rig, the finesse fishermen, the guys and gals that are throwing flukes, the guys and gals that are fishing jigs under bobbers, and especially in this crappie and bluegill situation. So I'm a believer in tungsten. It's definitely helped me catch more fish. I plan to use it here as soon as I'm hitting the water, which is right now and this week. And I'll use tungsten throughout the entire summer, and as you know it, again, all winter long. So those are some reasons I'm fishing tungsten, more focused on crappie and panfish right now so we can hit the ground running. But if you're not using tungsten in the boat, give it a shot, play around with it. Maybe don't invest your entire budget into tungsten if you haven't done it yet. Give it a try, build some confidence, see for yourself how it can make a difference, and I think it'll help you catch more fish. So tungsten, open water, definitely has a place, definitely has a time, and it will make you a better angler. Good luck out there, be safe.